Hi there. So I'm doing this special just for Clubhouse people. And this is a presentation I've done a couple of times already in Clubhouse. But the problem with Clubhouse is it's Audible only. And as you can see, my books are called Visnostics. That's a trademarked word, which stands for visualization diagnostics. And visualization is a big part of Visnostics. And I struggle with Clubhouse because of the lack of visualization. So I've had to be creative. So this is being recorded just for Clubhouse people so that you can get the visuals that you're missing when I speak during a presentation. Also, this is a brand new book. Look, it's still draft. I just got it yesterday. This is going to be the next major book that I put out. And this one is, instead of being geared for sales and marketing, which the book behind me is, this is going to be geared for leadership. And it's also a combination. This is what I'm going to be using during workshops. So nobody makes money on books, but I'm thrilled when people buy them and read them. And hopefully it's going to make the sales profession so much better when people start doing the things that I'm teaching. But anyway, enough of that. I'm going to go into what I'm going to do today is I'm going to read part of chapter 2. It's the first half of the book. So I'm just going to start with chapter 2. And one thing I want you to notice is that the graphics go with the words, and the graphics are going to help you retain the content, which is why Clubhouse is so difficult. I mean, you might hear an awesome session and not remember any of it because there were no visuals. Whether you're an audible learner or a visual learner, the combination of those two methods does help with retention. So again, keep your eyes open for this. It should be released in April, and it's going to be my best book so far. Okay, here we go. We're going to start out with, and by the way, all of this is the science behind Visnostics. So it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to get something out of this. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is just some fundamental basics about how your brain works. So right now you're learning something from me, which is the cognitive. You're learning at a cognitive level. I'm teaching at a cognitive level. But once you take the data that you're learning and you translate it into how you're going to apply it to your life, then you're getting to a metacognitive level. That means it's one thing to go and take a class on memorization, learning people's names. It's another thing to be self-aware that you're not good at remembering people's names. So metacognitive is a self-aware level of your cognition. I know that makes no sense, but here, I'll simplify it for you. This toolbox represents what we do, what we sell, our features and functions. It's the how we do things. Remember that. The toolbox represents the how of what we do. That is at a cognitive level. When we're selling at a cognitive level. The problem is our buyers are buying at a metacognitive level. So why are we selling at a cognitive level and forcing them to do this translation of why what you do and how you do it is important to them? So the green dollar sign that you're seeing right now represents results. That's what your audience cares about, not your toolbox, not the how, but the results of what you do. And they want to know how quickly it's going to happen. You know, saving them $1 million in a week is very different than saving them $1 million over 30 years. So how quickly can they expect the results that your toolbox is providing? Now we're going to get into the chemicals of the brain. There are 4 major chemicals in your brain. The first one is serotonin. And serotonin is the happiness hormone. I'm going to kind of try and keep track on this book. The second one is dopamine. That's the feel-good hormone. And then there's the oxytocin, which is the love hormone. and endorphins. Those are the pleasure hormones. So you can imagine with words like happiness, feel good, love, and pleasure, those are good feelings to have that we want to have. The problem is we also produce negative chemistry. And the one that we want to avoid at all costs is cortisol. And with a pandemic and things shutting down and people losing their jobs, cortisol has been flowing freely. The really serious problem with cortisol is it's a residue that keeps the neurotransmitters from triggering and communicating. So if you have cortisol released, it blocks every single one of the happiness chemicals. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but I mean, I've had leadership screaming and cussing and hollering at me, and it stresses me out. And then they ask me a question and I can't even think. I can't function because of the cortisol is so overwhelming that it keeps you from being able to function. It also causes all kinds of health problems. So cortisol is bad, but it's something that salespeople actually release in their audience without even meaning to. So one of the things Visnostics helps you is to focus in on the positive release of chemicals and avoiding the negative release of chemicals. All right, so this is a representation of something called the fight or flight. So if just your business card saying you're a sales pro, you're going to trigger this because nobody likes to be persuaded. When your phone rings and it says telemarketer or unknown caller, we ignore them today, right? Because we are triggered, we are programmed, we are just wired to avoid pain. And people trying to persuade us is painful. People that are interrupting our day when we didn't ask for it is painful. And this is where I'm going to just get this right up front. This is the most controversial thing that I teach, and I can back it up, and I'm going to actually read you some excerpts from this book. Our brains do not like questions. And there's a big difference between a question. So I've had some people go, well, I've got MRIs that show that, the brain really does like questions. No, there's a big difference between a question like, will you marry me, versus a question like, can you describe to me your decision-making process for this multi-million-dollar transaction? People can tell that question has an ulterior motive and you're trying to figure out if they're worth your time or not. It's insulting. We don't like questions. So let me give you some scenarios that are going to back this up. And anybody out there that's listening to this that's like, but my sales training taught me to ask questions. Well, guess what? So did mine. I took 30 years. Sandler, consultative training, or consultative selling, strategic selling. Believe me, I've been through them all. And here's the difference between me and the other instructors that you're talking to. I've actually done this stuff for 30 years. I've had all this training and I have gone out and executed it. And I've watched my clients physically react. I watched them squirm in their chairs. I've watched them get annoyed. I've watched them say things like, how many more questions are there? How much longer is this going to take? And then I've had them get up and leave in the middle of questions. And it wasn't the way that I was doing it. It is because our brains don't like questions. So I'm going to give you some examples from my book. And these are actual visualizations. So one of the things that Visnostics teaches you is how to trigger visualizations with wording, okay? I want you to recall how you felt when you went to your mailbox and you saw your census this last year. It's legal, it's a legal requirement. You have to fill it out. Not one person called me and said, oh my gosh, I got my census. Did you get your census? No, because we don't like questions. Okay, that's just one example. So all of us have had technical issues before, and we've had to get on the phone with some technical help, and they're always so nice and they solve your problem. And as soon as they're done, you're ready to hang up and get on with your day, right? Well, these people get bonuses. They have contests. It's important that you fill out that survey. So at the end, they'll say, well, do you mind taking just a few minutes and filling out a survey about the service that I gave you today? Do you do it? Because I can tell you, I used to work for a company that sold robots and customer service software, and less than 1% of the people actually take the time, despite excellent service, to fill out a form. Why? because we don't like questions. Here's some more. I mean, I'm not just giving you 4 or 5, I'm giving you like 10 examples. I want you to envision yourself, you're having a good time, you're laughing, you're at a state fair, maybe in a mall, and now your peripheral vision, you see someone approaching you with a clipboard. And they ask you, do you have time for a quick survey? Of course not. They just disrupted a really great moment and you're annoyed, but it still exists. We don't like questions. Okay, here's another one. Remember those sales training that you did get and you went out and executed on how to qualify your clients? Really think about it. You may have been in denial. We tend to be very selfish when we're selling, so we're not paying attention to the body language of our client. Did you ever have a client go, oh my gosh, come out here and ask me questions. I am so eager to meet with you, especially if you have a whole bunch of questions. No, it doesn't happen. And then I want you to remember the feeling that you had when you were looking for a job, maybe LinkedIn. You go to LinkedIn, it says easy apply, and you click on it, and then you have to fill out the same information that's on your LinkedIn profile. So you have to fill out your education and all these things. How many do you do? 50 a day? No, because it's the same questions over and over and over again. We don't like it. How many of you liked a pop quiz when you had a pop quiz in school? How many of you were tickled to death to go take the SAT? We don't like questions. Questions stress us out. After a long day, you come home, your spouse starts asking you questions, your kids start asking you questions. You just want to be left alone. You don't want to have to answer questions. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Name one person that likes going to the doctor, and as soon as you walk in, they give you a clipboard to fill out all this information about your insurance. We don't like questions. And so here's the problem. Our clients don't like questions either. So why are we constantly asking questions? And what happens is, because the fight or flight, the previous cartoon, because the fight or flight is triggered, your questions are not effective. The guard is up, the walls are up. People are ready to get out of here, and they're ready for it to be over. And you're doing this to them. You're destroying your rapport. It is the worst thing you can do in a client-salesperson relationship. So in the 20s, Dale Carnegie wrote a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And in the 20s, they didn't really know a lot about brain chemistry, but he describes it. In a nutshell, what this book is about is nobody cares how awesome you are, how educated you are, what kind of job you have. What they care about is how they feel when they're around you. Think about that. If we make our clients uncomfortable, if the fight or flight is engaged, you're releasing cortisol in your audience. Why in the world would they want to be with you? So what we want to do is release positive brain chemistry and avoid releasing negative brain chemistry. Pavlov's dog, he would ring a bell and then give the dog meat. And so eventually every time the dog heard a bell, it would salivate because it related, getting meat to the bell. Salespeople are not meat. Salespeople repel because they release cortisol, because they're trying to persuade people, and people don't like to be persuaded. So if you want to be Pavlov's dog and have your clients salivate, like when you pop up on their caller ID, they want to take your call. They want to schedule a meeting with you. You're not going to do it by asking questions. I'm going to teach you a way to get more information out of your clients than you ever dreamed possible without asking one single question, because we're going to do something different to release the positive brain chemistry instead of the negative brain chemistry. And so here's another little scientific factoid that is part of Visnostics. You've got to know these scientific principles to understand the power behind Visnostics. In 2000, our attention spans were 12 seconds. And we know this because, marketing people track how long people stayed on a page. They stayed on a page about 12 seconds before they got bored and moved on. In 2009, it had gone down to 8 seconds. A goldfish has a attention span of 9 seconds. So by 2009, our attention spans are shorter than a goldfish. But today, it's down to 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Do you realize what that means? If your prospecting messages are starting out with, my name is, my company does, I work for, I would like to schedule a meeting, you've blown it, because you've wasted your 3 precious seconds and you've triggered the fight or flight, and now people are done with your email. And by the way, our attention spans have not shrunk because we're changing physically. Our attention spans are changing because our environment is changing. We have so much data coming at us. We have so many people trying to sell us things. I mean, just think about it. In the old days, you had a phone and you had mail. Those were the 2 ways people could sell to you. Today, every messenger on every application, text message, most people have multiple emails. They're getting banned at every kind of email address. You've got phones, cell phones. It's crazy. And so you don't have time. I have over 100,000 unread emails right now. And I can tell you that most of them started out with, my name is, I work for, my company does. I don't care. What you just did to me is you just filled up my inbox and I have to go delete it. You're wasting my time, and you're buried. The emails I care about are buried in junk like you're sending me. So again, you're releasing negative brain chemistry. So you're the Pavlov's dog, but you're repelling people instead of attracting people. Okay, another scientific term that we should all be aware of is something called the rule of threes. It's also called the power of threes. Our brains like things in clumps of threes. If you think about a phone number, you're more likely to remember the area code in the first 3 digits than those last 4 because of threes. You're also taught, when you were learning all those how to ask questions, training, you were told, don't ask close-ended questions because you don't get very much information, right? Because it's yes and no, but it's also two responses. People their brains aren't stimulated with a 2 response, but if you give them a multiple choice of 3 responses and make them unusual, then you're more likely to get the right response that you're looking for. And our brains, and again, more scientific trivia for you, our brains love movement. So if your website is a static website with no movement, no video, people are going to spend less time there. But if you have one of those videos that are looping, people are more likely to spend time on it. In fact, I don't know if you remember the doodle videos that were so big. Have you ever realized how many times you watch the same videos over and over again when they loop? That's an effective movement that your brain likes. Your brain is stimulated. That's why you've watched it over and over again. And this is going to be an odd statement too. Our brains actually like to be shocked. Not shocked as in terrified or scared, but shocked as in, oh, where did that come from? That wasn't what I was expecting. So if you're starting your messages with, my name is, I work for, my company does, we expect that because everyone else is doing that too. But if you start your message out in a different way that no one else has done before, people are like, whoa, that's different. And they're curious and they're intrigued and they're more likely. And you're going to diffuse the fight or flight. You're going to diffuse the cortisol release, and you're going to stimulate positive brain chemistry. Another factoid about your brain and chemistry is that our brains prefer cartoons. So I love this graphic because there's a picture of a guy on one side and the artwork of his face. See, the thing about artwork is it's exaggerated. Look at the lines, look at the shading, look at all of the crow's feet and the whiskers and the little laugh line and around his eyes too. It's just very exaggerated. Your eyes are more drawn to the right than they are the left. And just like a photograph of a tree, we see trees all the time. So a photograph doesn't do it justice, so we ignore it. But an artwork where you're looking at the brush strokes and the colors and you're like, wow, that's so intriguing. It's really fascinating. Think about all the art galleries where people are just sitting there with their head tilted, just looking at art, trying to figure it out. right? Renderings are really big in real estate and in the food industry right now. And in things like construction, there's not a building, um, there's not something tangible to see yet. So there's a rendering where people can kind of see, and they kind of look like a cartoon. They kind of look real. And renderings are just awesome for our brains. We love them. And then another little tidbit about your brain, it loves humor, which kind of ties back to the cartoons. We relate cartoons to humor. So even if it's not funny, literally funny, it is having the same predictable brain chemistry as it would be if it was funny, because our brains are kind of preparing and anticipating it to be funny. So it's already releasing the positive brain chemistry. And then my books have got some very unusual art in them. They're done with pencil and ink, and there's a methodology. This is a picture of the artist that it's based upon. This man was known for having drawings. He did it for children. He did children's books, and he just recently died. So he's a modern day artist. But his artwork was done in such a way that it was hypnotic. And I get people all the time saying, but your artwork isn't very good in your book. And I love when people do that, because I can turn it. I say, describe to me one of the art that you didn't like. And they will describe it to a T. And then I'll say, and what was the subject related that I talked about in the book that was related to the drawing? And then they could tell me, and then I just smile and they understand exactly what just happened. I said, you may not think you like the artwork in my books, but it's effective, and it helps you remember, and it helps you retain. And that's what artwork does. And as salespeople, if your artwork isn't a reflection of the words and the messaging that you're delivering, then you're falling short. You want your graphics to help people be stimulated enough to look at the artwork, concentrate on it, relate it to your words, and retain your message. And that leads me into the 3 R's. So in Visnostics, I teach that very few people that you're presenting to are the actual decision makers. Even if you're presenting to a CEO, chances are high, if it's a big enough deal, he's got to go to the board and present. So he's got to be able to retain and remember. That's 1 R. Retain, remember, same kind of words. They've got to remember what you're saying. They've got to be able to relate to it. So you're hearing a lot about storytelling. Storytelling has a lot to do with these brain chemistry that we're talking about, but also it creates a rapport, and it makes them relate to your story. So if you can, I've been telling stories this whole time to help you understand some principles by giving you examples. So having that creates a connection with you, between you and your audience. Like, we've never met before, but right now you should be feeling a connection with me, or you would have already turned this off by now. And a lot of it has to do with the graphics that I'm using. A lot of it has to do with how this isn't about me. This isn't about me selling books. This isn't about me selling workshops. This is about you getting better at what you're doing, because I'm teaching you these things that are going to help you have a better lifestyle, because you're going to sell more. So having that, the second R, so the first R is retention, remembrance. The second one is rapport and making that connection. And the third one is most important, to be able to repeat. If I were to put this slide up, which I have, go to my Instagram, this is on there. You can feel free to take a screenshot, take it, do whatever you want to with it. But the purpose of this is you should be able to go back here and go, okay, the brain, she talked about the cognitive and the metacognitive. The toolbox is the how. The green $sign is results. The red clock is the timeline the results are going to happen. She talked about brain chemistry, the 4 good hormones, the bad hormones. The fight or flight is triggered by the bad hormones. Our brains don't like question which triggers the bad hormone. The Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is how to produce positives. The Pavlov's dog could be good or bad brain chemistry. Right now, salespeople are triggering bad brain chemistry automatically as the bell rings. We want to change that when our phone shows up, our caller ID shows up on their phone, that it's a good thing and they want to take our call. And they're only going to do that if we're releasing positive brain chemistry when we're together instead of negative. Our attention spans have shrunk to 3 seconds. We want like things grouped in threes. Rule of threes, our brains like movement. Our brains like to be kind of shocked. So don't be predictable and do what all the other salespeople are doing, or don't use the same marketing buzzwords all the other marketing people. Our brains prefer cartoons over charts and photographs. We love humor. Artwork is important. The way that it's done can be hypnotic. And then now we're on retention. So see, on this little graphic right here, I'm talking about the 3 R's, and you notice there's 3 graphics. This is how you make people remember. Remember and retain, have that rapport, something that they can relate to, and then they've got to be able to repeat it. Just like I just reviewed all of these graphics, and you should be able to do it as well. And then we get into execution. And I'm going to stop here today because that's all I'm going to share for free. But there's more to it. Once you know these principles, then Visnostics makes a whole lot more sense, because you're going to learn that it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You're going to learn to take questions and turn them into statements. You're going to require your audience to you're going to say things like, I'm going to make a statement, and you respond with, I can say this today. I wish I could say this today, but it's not important, not applicable. Rule of 3 choices. Now you've hijacked their brain, and they're listening to every word you're about to say. Pretty cool, huh? So there's more to it, but for now, that's it. This is what I'm preaching in Clubhouse right now, and I can't wait to teach you guys more. Thank you, and have a great day.